Everyone. Kim and I are so happy to be back with you after a little pause. I'm sure you can all relate. Life happens, and we just had to step away for a few weeks, but we are happy to be back with you today. And today, we are going to be talking about setting healthy boundaries. Now, this might be a perfect conversation as we move into the Easter weekend because we are probably going to be around family. And sometimes those boundaries are, or we have to set those boundaries with the people that we're closest to, which is often our family. So we welcome you in, and we are excited to have you back and joining our conversation. We have such amazing viewers, don't we, Kim?
We sure do. They are our cheerleaders and our supporters, and there's no better feeling than that, right? Especially when we started this podcast. There was all the feels for the two of us, right? And it's so great to know that everyone who's tuning in, I sometimes get comments from people who watch them back as a replay, and it's
Yes.
just so nice to know that people are enjoying the conversation. We're talking about things that everyone's needing support with on some level, right? So
Yes.
it's going to be a good conversation, and we've brainstormed about all the different topics that we can talk about, and boundaries is a big one. So we're going to have some fun today. So welcome, Liz and Angelica. Thank you for being here. Yeah, we're happy to be back too. It's like we were supposed to be back last week, and then last minute I was like, oh my gosh, Kellyanne, I can't be at the podcast on Tuesday. I need to clone myself, but that wouldn't be good.
No. We want the real you, Kim. We need the real you here.
No, artificial like me.
AI, right? No, we don't want AI. This is real. This is real talk between two real women who have real life things going on.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. So boundaries, it's so funny because up until 5, 6 years ago, that was never even a word that was in my vocabulary at
Hmm,
all.
really?
No, it really wasn't. And I mean, if I think about it, to me, there's certain things you hear a lot about in social media, and boundaries to me is a big, we're hearing so much more about it now. It just wasn't a word people used. And when I think of boundary, the old version of me would have seen it as something that was I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It wasn't positive in its energy, a boundary,
Yeah.
whereby now I recognize that boundaries are so, so important for our own health and wellness and happiness and taking care of ourselves and enjoying life. But then also, it just allows us to be that much more supportive and loving to the people around us, right? And it just makes some things so much easier. So, but yeah, I mean, we're heading into Easter, and I know family dynamics are a big thing for a lot of the people that I work with. I've certainly had to approach them in my own family as well. So, yeah, it's not easy, but that's why we're here to talk about it.
Exactly. We talk about the hard things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the hard things, the things that make a difference.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting, you're right about boundaries not really being a topic that anybody talked about. And I was really contemplating, I guess, where I've kind of come from in my journey on boundaries. And one thing that, and I guess I didn't realize this, and maybe it's just part of my personality. I'm an Aries, and I'm fiery and can be quite assertive.
Mhm.
And boundaries haven't really been an issue in a lot of my life
Mhm.
because I've been able to, I guess, assert myself. And I think depending on your personality, you can have a harder time with setting boundaries. And the one thing that um, there's so many, what I've learned over the course of the last few years is that there's so many different areas. Yes, Roby, you got it. There are so many different areas of my life that I really wasn't aware there was a boundary to be put in place.
Mm,
And so as I think as we evolve and as we grow, we start to find maybe more and more places where we have to set boundaries. And as busy women, boundaries are essential for us because it can lead us into people pleasing, taking on too much, overwhelm, all the things
mhm,
that can stress us out. And oftentimes, if we can figure out where we need to put a boundary in place and speak that boundary and share
mhm,
it with those we need to share it with, it can reduce some of that overwhelm, some of that um, not necessarily that busyness, but maybe because I mean, some of our lives are just really, really busy and we can't change that. But setting boundaries for, allowing people to help us and take some of the load, being able to say no.
mhm.
We, especially, I think, as women, we have a hard time saying no.
Yeah, and that's because we're people pleasers. Many of us are. And,
Yeah.
right as soon as you said that, I'm like, that's been my whole life is and I mean, anybody that knows me knows that I'm very, very open about that. I mean, it wasn't some of my people pleasing was just because I was taught to help others, to be kind, to be supportive, to be
Mhm.
loving, all of that. But then the other part of my saying yes to people is my need to be loved, my need to be needed. That's how
Mhm.
my ego was stroked. That's how I was validated, and my worth was constantly being recharged. It was like my battery. But you're absolutely right. And when the overwhelm kicks in, and we have all of the things that it's going back to that expression, Kellyanne. We teach people how to treat us,
Mhm.
right? So if I'm always that person who is the person who says yes to people, and even if we love the things that we're doing, we're still human and we can only take on so much, right? Good morning, Jeannie. So we have to recognize that our energy tells all. Our energy tells all, and we have to be able to recognize when something's not working anymore. And I think one of the signs for me always where I need a boundary or whether I'm not maybe I have the boundary in place and I'm not enforcing it. I'm not, it's one thing to set it, Kellyanne. It's
Mhm.
another thing to enforce it, but it's my energy where I get resentful, where I get angry, where I feel misunderstood, where I feel not seen. Those are all signs for me that something needs to change. I need to, sometimes for me, it's even before I can express it, I need to recognize it within myself. Why am I feeling this way? I know for me, I had to work a lot on that when I started my business because like I've already said, I'm a helper by nature, but we can't be, especially when you're on social media. I mean, you could be working all the time, responding, right? So that's the self boundary that we always have to talk about too.
Ex-
Anyways, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Um, I I like to think, and we've talked about this before, about the importance of the people we surround ourselves with.
Mhm,
But when we talk about setting boundaries with the people in our lives, we really have to talk about how the people in our lives are having an influence on us.
mhm,
So, how much of an influence do we want certain people to have in our lives?
mhm,
And I think often the people, and I think it's really important to allow yourself to look at, over my life, the people who I've wanted to have an influence in it, the people who I have wanted to spend more time with or spend less time with, that has changed.
mhm,
As I have grown, my boundaries with certain people have changed. And I have learned, as you said, I think, Kim, earlier, I have learned to protect my energy
mhm.
because my energy is all I have. That's where I create my life from. So I have to protect that. And the people who are so my dogs
I
dreaming.
was like,
Sometimes she gets loud. um, but it's giving yourself permission to distance yourself from people who are not supporting the direction you want to grow in, who are not
Mhm.
supporting the life that you want to live. And it's okay to
Stay focused.
you hear. It's okay to it's I'm sorry, I'm distracted. It's okay to say to those to set the boundaries for yourself in the people who you want to have more influence in your life and less influence in your life. And we can talk about how we do that, because I think there's some ways that you can do that. But setting she's obviously chasing something down the street in her
A little
dream.
bark, though. It's such a gentle little bark.
Yeah, it
Sounds
is.
like my dog when she's dreaming.
Well, that's what she's dreaming.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's
Oh, yeah,
dreaming.
she's dreaming.
Oh, okay, I was like I thought you meant like she's looking out the window.
Oh, no, no, she's laying on the bed dreaming. She's fast asleep. Yeah, she's dreaming. Um, okay, Kim, take it away. I'm distracted.
Oh, this is a great way to come back, right?
Yeah,
Can I go
fun.
dream too? Can I
Yes.
go dream? Yeah, bottom line is that you're absolutely right. Like to sort of summarize what you were just saying, and this is for everyone, and thank you for everyone who's still listening through all of this, is to really recognize as you're on your own path, and usually the people that are in Kellyanne and I's life, there's a reason why we're all here. We're all here together because we're on this journey of continuing to grow, to heal, to reach ourselves to new levels, to allow ourselves to dream and all the things. And sometimes the people that are in our life, we may need to create some boundaries around that. And remember, boundaries are here to help us be the better person, to help us be the person we're meant to be, so that we're more loving and supportive and having better communication and all of the things. I was thinking though, as you were saying that, yes, we can create boundaries with these people that are in our life, but we also can just sometimes just choose to slowly step away from that relationship. We don't always have to. I was on a call with Daniel Mate, Gabor Mate's son. We were talking a lot about boundaries and healthy relationships and all of the things. And he was saying, we don't always have to like make this big announcement that we are now putting up a boundary in this relationship. We don't have to do that. We can slowly just create them for ourselves. We know what they are. Maybe it's just that I'm not needing to respond to texts the second they all come in. And you don't have to tell all the people in your life that you're no longer going to be sitting on your phone ready to respond to every single one of their messages, but you just do it. And if it does come up that you need to express it, you can do. But you can just, or even maybe it's that person in your life that I don't know. Do we need to make a formal announcement if we're ending a relationship with someone? Do we need to? I don't know. Especially depending on how deep that relationship is, we can slowly just be a little bit less available for them. I don't know, because I don't know. Not because we can be as kind and supportive and loving when we're communicating this need. Let's just call it a need, a guideline. We don't have to call it a boundary if that doesn't feel right for you, but we can always communicate it in the most loving and supportive way. But again, we can't assume that the other person on the other end is going to receive it the way we intended to deliver it. And that's out of our control, right? So I think for me, ultimately, it's coming down to recognizing where they're needed, why they're needed. Because again, if we know why they're needed, then we're going to be more willing to do the hard work. It's one thing to recognize what the boundary is, and we're talking about boundaries with other people, but I just want to highlight that we also have boundaries within ourselves. Maybe we do. Should we? How much time we're allowing ourselves to be on social media, when we're turning our phones off at the end of the day? What are the things that are going to help us, improve the way we are? If this is where I am today, but I want to become this next version of myself that's healthier, that's more aligned, that's on that healing journey, is recognizing what that is for you. And then it's a matter of doing the work to put it into place, which is not the easiest. Especially, we talked about family. Like, it's hard with family because we're underneath these roles of what it means to be a good daughter, a healthy, a good sister, a good wife, like all of that. And that's what makes it difficult.
You're right. And I think, when you talk about how to set these boundaries, especially with people who you are in a, kind of a loving relationship with, especially when it comes to family or things like that. I think, as you said, Kim, you don't need to explain. You
Mhm,
don't need to say, I'm setting a boundary. In fact, explaining can often hurt the relationship.
mhm,
So I think setting that boundary and just moving into it gradually, beginning to say, no, I can't do that without having to explain it,
mhm,
letting go of the guilt. I am setting a boundary for me. You're the only one that has to know that. The
mhm,
other people in your life don't need to know that. And the truth is that for those people who we have to set up a boundary, especially people who are closer to us, setting those boundaries allows us to show up in that relationship
mm,
better with more love, because
mhm,
we don't have the resentment, we don't have the anger that we may feel, because whether or not we feel they're taking advantage of our our good nature or whatever it is. But setting that boundary with those people without explanation, without guilt, really does allow us to show up better in those relationships. And the people who we need to set the boundaries with, they're the ones who are going to complain, and
yeah,
they're going to fight against them,
yeah,
right? They are often the ones who are going to say, why aren't you available to help me?
mhm,
Or, where have you been all this time? And just, I think, understanding that those people, as we said, Kim, earlier, which is one of my favorite lines, we teach people how to treat us.
mhm,
If we have allowed, if we haven't set boundaries with certain people in our life up to this point, once they see that shift,
mhm,
they are maybe going to rebel against that. And we
mhm,
have to be ready for it.
mhm,
It's a matter of standing your ground and knowing that what you're doing is the right thing for you.
mhm,
Standing in your power, because I find there are people in our lives who are, and I don't think anybody can make you feel guilty, but there are people in our
mhm,
lives who really try
yeah, yeah,
to make us feel guilty. Um, and that's a choice in you, whether or
mhm,
not you want to feel guilt, or whether you want to stand in your power and say, and know, you don't have to say it to them, but know in your heart, this is what's right for me. This is what I need to move myself forward. This is what I need to protect my energy. This is what I need to have peace in my life.
mhm, mhm. And I'm reading a comment here from Jeannie. Like it feels so good to finally know. To me, it's about worth. It's self-worth.
Mm,
When
mhm,
I love myself, when I know my worth, when I know how I want to be treated and why I deserve to be treated that way.
mhm,
Like I'll give an example with, and I'll keep it anonymous here, but I won't be yelled at. I do not want to be yelled at. And I remember speaking this many, many times to this person. And eventually, if it continues to be yelled, if you continue to be yelled at, like I would hang up the phone. And it was because I respected myself enough to know that I don't deserve to be treated that way. And that's just one example. But when you start to stand up for yourself, there is going to be a lot of emotion that comes with that because again, so many of us have a lot of history and it can cause you to cry, it can cause you to feel an immense amount of being proud of yourself, like because it takes a lot of strength. You might even shake from it. You can feel like it's like when you have to implement that boundary and you can feel that lump in your throat coming, especially for those of us that have silenced our voices and not stood up for ourselves. It's a huge journey. It's like you've just climbed this biggest mountain ever, and it feels good. It feels good. So
mhm.
are they easy? No, they're not easy, but they're absolutely necessary and they will make your life better. And one thing we haven't touched on, Kellyanne, but I know you and I both have talked about this, is that these boundaries, these guidelines, these ways that you want to choose to live, they don't have to be set and then never changed. They are fluid. We can, if, especially if we have a relationship with someone that we're wanting to create a little bit of distance around because that person's not necessarily, maybe they're going through something. I'm going to talk about this for a second, actually. Sometimes when people are going through something really, really difficult, you want to be there for that person, but you could be feeling very drained. Their energy is now draining you. Their energy is now making you feel not your best. And it's starting to impact your life, but yet you still love and care for the person. Okay. This is an example I've experienced myself. So it's being able to say, I still love you. I still care for you, and still let them know that. But then you can also have these little boundaries that you put in place for the relationship. But it doesn't mean that they can't change. As that person, hopefully that other person is also hearing what you're saying. Hopefully they're doing their own quote unquote work, healing on their end. And then there might be some changes in those relationship boundaries that you set because you can, right? Because it's safe to. So they're not rigid. It's not something that has to be like this big wall that you've built up in front of yourself that says no one. And now, because we've talked about that too. You start building walls around you. Maybe you've been hurt and you're like, everyone's going to hurt me, so I'm going to build up these walls around me. But then that's not also going to help you long term either, because you're now not letting good come in. So it's just, I'm recognizing as I'm talking about this, the layers of conversation that are around this.
Mhm.
So it's a
Mhm.
good conversation for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that I have learned and that I try and implement in my life is that I try and show people by how I treat them, how I want to be treated.
Mhm.
So I teach people how to treat me by the way, and as we said, you teach people how to treat you. I think that um, when you begin to maybe ask, and Kim said sometimes we don't have the capacity to hold
Mhm.
space for somebody. So when you start to ask people in your life, I'd like to, or I want to be able to, I need to share this with somebody. Are you at a place in your life where you can
Mhm.
handle dealing with this right now?
Love that.
Or are you, is this not a good time for me to share? Because we do want to do things to help the people in our lives that we love and our friends, but sometimes we can't handle it. So if you start, kind of showing people how you want them to treat you by asking those kind of questions, by saying, you know, by saying to people, it's okay if you say no. It's okay if you can't do this for
Mhm.
me. Like rarely do we do that. Rarely do we ask for something, or and rarely do we say to people, do we give them permission to say no? And so that conditioning that we have that says you need to be kind to people, you
Mhm.
need to be of service to people. It's the right thing to do.
Yep.
I have a friend who, to me, struggles to set boundaries with some of the time that she devotes to other people.
Mhm.
And she has said, it's just the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And I think that conditioning that we have, especially maybe as women,
Mhm.
um, that setting boundaries kind of pushes you to break that. And it's like, it's like everything in your life. When you have a set of conditions or a belief around it, every time you push against that belief, the tendency is that you're going to be pulled right back into it. I see it as an elastic band. So as you pull yourself away from that belief that, well, I have to take care of everybody. I have to do the right thing. I have to think of others before myself. Every time you do that, your mind, you're going to be pulled back into that. Yes, this is how a good person would behave. They
Mhm.
would do all the things.
Mhm.
So shifting that belief, to know that, okay, yes, all these people are important, but so am I.
Mhm,
And really, I am best for all these people in my life when I take care of me.
mhm,
And that's not selfish to say, I have to take care of me first.
mhm. It's necessary. It's
It
100%
is.
necessary. I'm sure you've spoken with many a women. I say women because that's mostly who we work with that
Mhm,
come to us. And I mean, I've been this woman, so depleted, so overwhelmed, so emotional that all of a sudden, when somebody cares for them and somebody who sits with them, is just the tears just come out for so many. So I think it's really important that we recognize that if you are of the person who wants to be there, who wants to give, who wants to serve, who wants to be there for their friends, just recognize is this just know that what you're giving out to somebody else, you're taking away from you. So if we think about it as a
mhm,
bank, right?
mhm,
So you only have so much currency, so much energy within you. And if I keep spending that energy and I'm not doing anything to fill it back up, well, we know what happens with the bank, right? So
mhm,
you have to just know that if you're choosing to be that person, know that it's going to come at some type of cost or expense to you. You might now have to say no to somebody else who you would well, I was going to say who you would rather have been able to support. That takes me back. Can we change our mind? Can we say yes to something and then recognize that it's no longer in my energy? And I've had to do this. I know people
mhm,
that have had to do this. You say even things that were your it was a business decision, right? Or it was something that you agreed upon. But we just have to know too. This is the other thing about life is that if I want to bring my best self to you, and I already know that my best self isn't here, then you're not getting the best of me in that opportunity. So to me, when you're approaching those relationships and those conversations where you might have to change your mind, where you might have to say, I'd love to help you, but I just have had a really, really hard week and I really could use a night at home by myself. And I'd love to be there for you if we could schedule another time in the future. Like to me, that's the way the conversations go.
mhm,
And these true loving relationships that we're meant to have in our life, the people that are meant to stay in our life, they might not understand it at the time. But what you said a few minutes earlier, Kellyanne, is when we give someone else permission to say no, or we say no, it's teaching another person. This is the power of women leading and supporting each other is we show another woman that they can do it too.
mhm,
And that we don't have to be that woman that's running around trying to do all the things, keeping all the balls in the air, making everyone happy, cooking all the food. Like it's just impossible. Our world is not what it used to be. When we were kids and our parents, it's just times are changing. We know that times have changed. And so to expect that we're supposed to do all these things and take care of ourselves and hit the gym up and make our food and take care of the kids and read the bedtime stories,
mhm,
Kellyanne,
mhm.
it's impossible.
It
But
is.
yeah,
It
yeah.
is, and I think, when it feeds your soul to do things, you know that you are doing it with the right intention.
Mhm.
When you feel resentment, when you feel maybe some anger, when you feel taken advantage of, that's where you know that a boundary needs to be put in place,
Mhm.
because that is not then aligned with what feels good for you. And of course, there's going to be situations where we're going to have to do things for the people that we love that we would
Oh,
rather
totally.
not do. We've talked about this before too, right,
Yeah,
Kim?
yeah.
Where, yeah, I'd rather not do that. But when it's coming, when it's the odd thing and it's coming from a place of love, um, then you're going to do things that you don't necessarily always want to do. But I think the boundaries that we're talking about are really, kind of that more consistent way of how we want people to treat us.
Treat us. I would agree. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? This conversation could go in many, many directions,
Hmm.
but, I think we definitely were on the same page considering we don't always talk about what we're gonna talk about.
No.
Do you guys know that? Like, we don't talk about what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah,
We have a
it'd be really interesting if one day we had totally different perspectives.
and then and then the person I am would be like, "Okay, I'm gonna go with Kellyanne. I'll find something to contribute." That's
Oh,
what I
see,
would do.
that's not me, unfortunately.
I know I have a lot to learn. I'm like, follow your own path, but the conversation would be so to be like distracted,
Yeah,
right? We'd be over here, we'd be over here. So for consistency and like fluidity of the conversation, I
yeah,
would try and find a way to
I know.
bring my conversation with
I know.
yours.
And really I think, for you and I, Kim, we have both done a lot of work and have really realized some of the what I would call truths,
Mhm.
that just make us better, that just make us, help us to grow and help us to live more authentically. So those are really the things. We might have different perspectives on things, but I think the truth of what we speak about is very similar.
I would agree. I would agree. And what that's the beautiful thing. Like I for those of you that are still listening with us here, thank you. And if you're catching this as a replay, let us know, but that's what we're doing here. We're bringing conversations to the streams of your consciousness to get you thinking. And again, if you're thinking about a relationship right now in your life that there's energy around it that's not
Mhm.
good for you. You know it. Take the time to sit down with yourself, whether you do it in a journal, whether you go for a walk and allow yourself to think, but just think about the relationship. Recognize its level of importance for you. Recognize what would make the relationship healthier, what would make it improve, what would make you feel more loving when that person is reaching out to you, what needs to change, because unless you do that, you won't know where to go with it, and you'll just continue to feel the same energy. And again, people cannot read your mind. So if there's something happening in the relationship that isn't okay with you, it's not going to change unless you
Unless you change it.
right, like I
Yes.
think that's important.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Mm,
Oh,
I'm reading comments.
I know, I know, I know. So thank you
Yeah.
to all of the it's so nice to have you all back. Thank you for
Thank
for
you.
returning with us. It helps our conversation when we see the comments and when we see people engaging, because we're just a 30-minute podcast. We can't always interact, but it does help us and kind of leads our conversation as we see some of the comments that you're sharing. So
Yeah.
thank you for being here with us today, and we'll just quickly chat a little bit about the work that Kim and I do, just for anybody new who's on. I've actually shifted my business a little bit. And I work with women in midlife, women who are going through transitions in midlife, and I help them to get unstuck and to reprogram some of the beliefs, the limiting beliefs that are keeping them stuck, and help them create a life that they love. And I do one-on-one coaching. I also do some group programs. I do some free master classes, and so I would love for you to follow me at on Facebook and on Instagram, and just be part of that my community.
I love that. And as you said what you do, I'm like, yeah, I do that too. And I love that about us because we do it in different ways though, right? We
Mhm.
do it in different ways. Ultimately, so much of the work that I do with women, I work one-on-one with women, but I also have a group coaching program called Food Freedom Foundations. And then I also have a membership community space called Empowered Movement. But I'm helping women heal their relationships with their bodies, helping them learn to have more kindness and acceptance towards their bodies so that we're not always chasing these superficial ideals of what the woman's body is to be looking like, and recognizing that our worth goes so much deeper than the skin that we are in, and helping you recognize your truest potential, raising your confidence, and just enjoying life more. So I coach, I'm also a speaker. I've gone into lots of different spaces to speak, and both of us are published authors too. Let's not forget that,
Yes,
Kellyanne.
we are. We are.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Obviously, Kellyanne and I are both available. If you ever have questions, about these conversations. If you want to know more about our coaching, you can just simply reach out. My Instagram as well is at @KimBasler_food freedom, and my website's kimbasler.com. And Kellyanne, do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up today?
I don't think so. We will be back next week.
Yes, we
That's
will.
the plan.
Yes,
So
we
we look forward to seeing you next week with another great, important conversation. So have an
amazing.
amazing week, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone. Take care.